Good morning, everybody. I hope you're all doing good. Am I audible? Those of you whoever have joined. So yesterday we had the first paper discussion. I'm sure people must have been very much people must have been very much excited yesterday. अभी एक दिन के बाद तो थोड़ा सा excitement शायद कम हो गया होगा. But yeah, good morning, everybody. And second paper was also pretty much exciting. अभी ज्यादा कुछ देखने पढ़ने का तो टाइम मिला नहीं, but I am trying to talk to you extempore looking at the paper. Thank you so much. Thank you. So let us begin. I will start sharing the question paper. I hope अभी तक तो आपको मिल गया होगा. సార్ సాఫ్ట్ కాపీ ఏదన్నా మధు సార్ మీరు ఉన్నారా లైన్లో? సాఫ్ట్ కాపీ ఏదన్నా గ్రూప్లో
చెప్పండి.
షేర్ చేస్తారేమో చూడండి, లింక్ కానీ లేకపోతే పేపర్ కానీ వాట్ ఎవర్, వెబ్సైట్ లింక్ కానీ.
సరే.
ఓకే, నిన్నటిది కూడా ఒకసారి మళ్ళీ పెట్టేసేయండి ఇక్కడ. అండ్ ఆర్ యూ ఏబుల్ టు సీ ద స్క్రీన్? So pretty much give me some time. We will do it rather slowly, not in a hurry. Kal to raat ki baat thi, so I think we will slightly, faster and all. We will try to do a little, slowly today. Only thing is, whenever my voice is going down, kindly ping so that I would correct my voice. So there are a few things about the paper. एक बार हम पूरा पेपर देखेंगे from whatever document was just now. एक बार पूरा पेपर देखते हैं. I'll just scroll it down. So interesting questions here, beginning with digitalization of rural economy. So that is where I was mentioning in the classes for the last couple of years, digital anthropology. So this is something that had come up there. Then origin of state societies is the topic generally we study in paper 1. But then, as you must have seen in yesterday's the paper also, I mean the first paper also, that paper 2 related questions such as social stratification had come in the paper 1. So that barrier, as I was telling many times to our students in the class, that do not try to stick to this paper 1 and paper 2 kind of a distinction. So I think that is also confirmed. एक बार पूरा पूरा देखते हैं, ठीक है? And then sorry. And then the Syro-Malabar Christians, so Syrian Christians as otherwise we call. For the last several years, I had been speaking about this Kerala Christians and study of Narmadeshwar Prasad. So now, this segment of Kerala Christians is being singled out and asked. And artisan tribes of Jharkhand, so as a part of Vidyarthi's categorization of Indian tribes. This was one category, and good number of artisan tribes are reported from Jharkhand. So I think that is one. देखते और this one, causes of stunting and wasting among tribal children. If you could recall the last batch, I mean, the 2023 December, and 2022 December also. Also, we saw that one short video I was trying to show on this particular topic itself, stunting and wasting among tribal children. So that's how it is. And then we have this discussion, I think, the recent batch also, when we were closing, we were talking about this PVTGs and special programs, etc. Question is highly interesting here. That on the nomenclature, why is it that they were erroneously called primitive tribal groups? I think that is where the catch is, and that's where your knowledge of your understanding of the subject is actually going to be tested. And PISA Act, I mean, in several ways, it was discussed actually how exactly the tribes had received the modern tribal panchayats. Mm, so that's where we see whether delegation had happened, democratization, a real change in the empowerment of the tribes had actually happened. So basically here, when I was discussing in your class, I was mentioning Vidyarthi's comments on how different tribal communities had received modern panchayat raj system. So and yeah, this is one other beautiful question that was asked, that is, deconstruct the colonial history of Indian anthropology, highlighting the critical role played by the Indian anthropologists in sustaining its autonomy. So this is Indian pride. The pride that, what we have to study, how we have to study, what are our preferences in studying in anthropology? Is it that whatever colonial masters had done, are we going to continue with that? Or some other influences there, or we are trying to have our own preferences? And is there any way in which our own auto-anthropological understanding is much better than somebody else's way of explaining about Indian culture? So, and yeah, we were talking about Mehrigar yesterday. So these two have become the competitors, Mehrigar versus Rakhi. And yeah, long time people had been waiting for such a huge evidence. We were exploring this in the class also. Name it, we have it, kind of. So consistent effort and perseverance, I think a lot of funding that made it really possible for such a marvelous site to emerge out of nowhere. And yeah, this was also something we had been speaking about in the classes across the years, that comparison-based questions in the approaches of the thinkers is very, very important. These two stalwarts, actually two different fields altogether, one dealing with the mainstream, one dealing with the simple and tribal societies. I mean, when you speak about them, two stalwarts, I mean, you are trying to show them as the ones that are heading two major wings of anthropology in India, and their comparison either in terms of their personality or in terms of the content they generated, the kind of field work related work they had given. I mean, that is really marvelous. And yeah, one more very beautiful kind of a question, forest policies from 1878 Act to 2006. How exactly they have impacted. So definitely, there's all gray areas that you're going to uh, write about. And yeah, it is here the ethical dimension coming up, biological and socio-anthropological ethics. As we see here that, I hope my position is fine. Am I visible? If not audible? Yeah, I'm sure. So I was making a mention of this. So biological and sociocultural anthropology because of the recent advances in artificial intelligence and gender. So this is something that should have been there in paper one, but yeah, it comes up in paper two. Uh, Nothing but eugenic ethics again. So yesterday also I was making a mention of this in the first paper's discussion. That is the underlying theme of several things in anthropology paper this year looks to be the ethics that are involved. Having said that, yeah, this is once again a very interesting question how Samunda his sacrifices have contributed to. So we would see a three-way categorization of his impact on tribal society. And population पे तो question आना ही आना था because the kind of achievement that we have had, becoming the largest population in the world, and hence there are imminent dangers or imminent issues that are waiting for our care and concern in the future. So I think from that point of view, this question has to come in the next 50 years, meaning the students who are attending classes during the last 1.5 years, you might have understood the reason why I have been telling you that be ready for question on demography, question on census, question related to the trends to emerge in the future. So this first 5-10 minutes of discussion is basically to bring home a point that be confident, don't really worry, don't run around. Only thing is you must actively, much more actively get involved in writing, in discussing with me, and try to come up with new ideas. I'm always there for you to help you out with whatever kind of new ideas you're coming up with in writing. Let us discuss, let us get in touch. And yeah, basically it is to communicate this particular thing and also to give you that immense confidence that is required to take head on with this exam. That is what you have been studying, what you have been taught in the classroom, what you've been given in terms of material, etc. All that is in the right place, in the right spirit and right sphere for the examination. So रॉय बर्मन का भी हमने बात किया था, I mean, in the left-wing extremist regions, etc. So his idea of what exactly it means by buffer zone. This was also lovely. I was actually talking about it yesterday to the students. Then a student of, I guess, yeah, 2009 batch, I guess 2009. He was mentioning this, Madam, आप तो हमारे batch में भी कराए थे this particular thing of ILO convention. So it's like, yeah. I was pretty happy that student of that batch trying to come up and say that iski baat hui thi. And then you have Apathani agricultural practices, so whatever ritualistic practices are there. And yeah, I remember to have shared this, one of the movies of Apathani. We had watched this movie in quite a couple of batches. And that's where we were actually trying to talk about, I guess, in the previous batch, how ritualistic practices are there in shifting cultivation or in dry and rainfed agriculture, the hill cultivation whatsoever, and how exactly their belief system is thoroughly dovetailed with the agrarian system. And yeah, this is, of course, if no other question comes to the mind, this question should be there, kind of. Thank you so much, Rakesh Bhai. I think you are the same Rakesh whom I was troubling in the classroom. And the status of sixth schedule also in the sense that we should be writing on whatever the recent discussions and recent uh, critiques whatsoever. Was it really a delegation that was happening? Was the freedom of self-governance that was there? Is it that we're looking for much more to come? Yeah, constitutional safeguards. So these are pretty direct ones, but I know. Yeah, अच्छा लगा. Custodians of natural resources are the tribals, but they are not. They're the most deprived. Critically examine how climate will impact their survival in future. Good. इसका भी देखते हैं. I was reading it first. And all very juicy and beautiful questions of the difference between secularism, religiosity, religious fundamentalism, and spiritualism. जैसे आप if you're explaining each term, there itself your entire answer is done. And decriminalization, ये तो एक report हो गया. Based on the report, this question comes. नहीं नहीं बेटा, I am going to discuss this entire paper. I'm only giving, Soumya, I'm only giving uh, I'm only giving the overview of the paper right now. फिर हम वापस चलते हैं each of the questions we are going to take. I'm not finishing it as such. ठीक है? And इसके ऊपर तो I remember to have done 2 video presentations, and within that presentation that I think I have done 2 or 3 years ago on COVID marginalization related writings, the whole lot of writings out there. This gives a real beautiful picture, especially if you are there from the medical field, if you had worked in the COVID time in the health sector. I think the experience that you must have had would come handy. But then COVID becomes a watershed kind of a development for us to have a check on everything for that matter. The very first question of digitalization of rural India to this particular question of marginalization. So it actually had shaken the entire infrastructure and health sector fields to see how the elitistic communities and maybe the common masses have been treated by the disease itself. And it is in that context marginalized sections becomes important. Yeah, ये अच्छा लगा in the sense that on the one hand, a bigger question is asked and then इसका तो कुछ tail लगा रहे. In many of the questions, मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा. And 2 questions coming up. And student also has to be pretty much cautious about which part has to be given how many marks. ठीक है? And then nationalism वाले questions तो हम expect कर रखे थे, and ethno-nationalism, especially in the context of several tribal communities, etc. तो ये भी बहुत ही अच्छा topic है. Very, very contemporary. So who says that there is no current affairs related thing in anthropology? It is pretty much there. Throughout the paper, we see so much of current orientedness. Taken. And then and then you have this one. Paleolithic पे तो paper 1 में भी आया था. I was making a mention in the classroom in the last few batches also that South India को अलग से separately treat करो, because there is so much of wealth of lower Paleolithic in South India. Yeah, Kerala could be an exception, But throughout, we find so many evidences out there. So in terms of tool typology, technology, in terms of density, the number of sites that have been exposed, the kind of all-known culture that is there in this particular region, this makes South India very, very special. And the theocratic state from secular, ये दो questions जो थे, and also if you remember, yesterday also I was mentioning this, something to do with religion-centered writing, God-centered writings. I think such kind of questions have increased. तो मुझे अच्छा लगा कि भगवान को याद दिला रहे क्लास में एग्जाम में एग्जाम लिखने से पहले शायद आपने याद नहीं किया हो, but then I think the questions are making you remember. And yeah, so theocratic state, distinguish it from secular, liberal, democratic. देखते हैं. Illustrate your answer with the examples from tribal and contemporary societies. Let's see how it will be. The last question, I guess, this one. Economic, social, and developmental impacts on tribal communities with special reference to mining. So, ये तो direct वही question हो गया. Description by D.N. Majumdar, a tribe in transition, the whole society, which was impacted by mining. So that gives all the necessary references whatsoever. So ये रहा questions का एक overview जो कहते हैं. Yeah, Maharashtra should also be added in South. So हम फिर इसको we are starting with the first question, ठीक है? Am I allowed to take a couple of minutes of break? 2 minutes, I will just join back. Just a couple of minutes. I hope it is fine with the team. Is it fine with the team? 1 minute to break that. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm back with you. Let's begin the story. So we were talking here about digitalization of rural economy. So that is where I think we can with this. So यहाँ पर हो गया. Maybe perhaps people like Daniel Muller can be used as a in the opening statement. Who was somebody who dealt with this terminology such as digital anthropology. Now, when it comes to the impact, this is a huge question. So to say, there's a very huge question. Nevertheless, what you will have to do is at least हर चीज का आपको थोड़ा सा gist देना पड़ेगा, because in the digital India kind of a question this is. But yeah, because it is being asked in anthropology, we should see to it that anthropology related discussions also should definitely come. So what I look for here is, you must be able to bring in one very significant discussion that is, yeah. For me, impact of digitalization on rural India has two extremes. One is, on the one hand, you have utility-based, impact. On the other hand, you may see the addiction-based impact, meaning though there is increasing technological capability plus huge impact on economy, etc. There are also found the health hazards in a major way. Meaning, on the one hand, there are small-scale industries, village-based industries that have definitely picked up. But on the other hand, we also see that there have been questions that are raised on what is called a reverse urbanization. In fact, reverse urbanization or enhanced localization could be seen as one of the positive things that must have happened. And see, all the more so in the COVID kind of a situation when digitalization had helped people to relocate to the rural area. So that was the reverse urbanization that was happening. Now, when it comes to digital anthropology, we see that this had led to from the digital anthropology point of view, we have to examine all these phenomena in a holistic perspective. And hence, as I had tried to summarize, whether the technological enhancement had happened, it looked so beautiful that in a largely illiterate or semi-literate populations of India, digital currencies, digitalization, and so many apps being used even by the rural communities, that shows that in order to use technologies, one need not have such a thoroughly high literate population. So the digital economy that we are having is run by a large number, run by and for a large number of illiterate population. It means it's quite an achievement. So I think whatever kind of praise that you could give for the current government, I think this thing would really help. So what I was thinking was that holistically, you may perhaps do with how the industry, small scale, etc., industrial sales and the digitalization had incorporated new ideas, ideologies, norms, political structures, and all that. we see that the rural segment is affected by several tools. Maybe perhaps here you can also add visual anthropology, and more than anything else, you have biometrics that are being taken up, that are being used. So all this, based on the binary coding, whatever, digitalization had happened. But yeah, you may perhaps also talk about the kind of increasing crime, where preparedness is required, increasing health hazards. That is where more of psychological counselings that are very much required. And yeah, consumerism, uh, more than necessary. Capitalism, though capitalism has got all its benefits, these also, I think, have to be addressed. But yeah, something that is very, very important, literacy, education, spreading. So I hope that is fine. Coming to the next one, origin of state societies. So here you may perhaps use arguments, the evolutionary schemes by people like Elman Service, Marshall Salins, where you see the origins from stateless to state societies. Having said that, in the first paragraph, you try to enlist the chief characteristics of state. And in that sense, you may perhaps distinguish it from entities such as chiefdoms. So your central theme in the whole thing may be centralization of power, something like a standing army. Yes, sir, you will be listing. But for me, what is more important is how the state societies, state entities have taken into its fold, their fold, the stateless or pre-state institutions. I think this should form the crux of your answer. I hope that is clear. Coming to the Malabar Christians, so you may perhaps begin your story by talking about, as I was mentioning earlier, Narmadeshwar Prasad. On the other hand, this particular section of the population, Christian population, as in the last few years we had seen, this is that group that comes up with a very clear exhibition of understanding that culture is not equal to religion. Because this had been the community that was taking up interfaith dialogue. And also was using rituals as a mechanism of binding different religious groups. If you remember elsewhere, in the study of Shamirpet also, we made a mention of the same thing, that festivals, rituals, etc., are doing the job of unifying the people, right? So this is one. And also, if at all you can stretch a bit, two other things are there. So one is culture and religion different. This is one. Second one is this is also um, uh, uh, a sect in Christianity wherein we see the very clear exhibition of hierarchy or based on the priesthood. So we see that for a long time, priesthood and hence caste-like institutions seem to be existing within this community. And third aspect, which you may talk about from the recent discussions that were happening, what were their opinion, what was their stand on the Waqf Act of the government, and how they are trying to actually safeguard the Waqf grants or properties that are there under the churches. So you can see three different ways in which, three different pointers wherein you can talk about Syrian Christians. And yeah, I think we have another question coming up here, that is artisan tribes of Jharkhand. So as I was saying a while ago, you can use LP Vidyarthi's classification of Indian tribes based on economic elements. Within that, we have artisan tribes as one of the variants. So it has been studied traditionally by Indian anthropologists that various kinds of livelihood patterns, including artisan activities. And now when it comes to Jharkhand, I think I would want you to apply the same kind of a categorization within artisans, people like Vidyarthi had used. Um, uh, don't really worry, because most often when those examples are given, a lot of them are part of Jharkhand. So this word Jharkhand might have been very disturbing for you, but then not to worry, because when the researchers were done, it is more or less on the in the same region, and you need not have to worry much. So I thought this answer has to be categorized into three groups. One is simple artisans. The second one could be Hinduized ones, who might have been serving the temples and landlords, etc. And there are the others that may be called advanced artisan communities. So people like Mahali, people like Lora, etc. These are the simple tribes. And when we come to highly Hinduized, Kurmi, and some of the advanced tribes, such as Karmali. So one other, these are the common names that you must be knowing, and other kind of names can also be added. In each of them, what is the artisan activity? In the case of Mahali and Laura, so blacksmithy kind of a thing happens. The Hinduized Kurmi seems to be getting involved in the kind of art forms that they will be supplying to the Hindu community. And then the advanced ones seem to have got into the mainstream economic subsistences like full-fledged agriculture, etc. So, but this also shows that government's policy of towards protection, preserving of artisan tribes seem to have been very dismal. Though things started to come up much later, by which time a lot of damage was already done to these communities. So here what I want you to bring is one major indication. In the opening paragraph, you may write infant mortality rate. Uh, Infant mortality rate and maybe C5 mortality rate, U5, U5 mortality rate. Apart from this, you should also be having certain census-related information, such as overall growth pattern. When compared to mainstream. And also, you have to give the statistics related to child malnourishment within India and comparison with the mainstream population and tribal population. All this and then various other kinds like iron deficiency, calcium deficiency, or protein deficiency disorders, etc. When we are giving all this in terms of statistics and numbers, this is where I always tell you that you must have your statistics done very properly. Only then you'll be in a position to answer such kind of questions. No? Yeah. Here, what we should know is first part also has to be done into two different segments. It says critically discuss the recent welfare measures initiated by the government for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Here you are supposed to bring in one, the kind of categorization between mainstream, the bigger traditional tribal society, scheduled tribes, vis-a-vis PBTGs. Now, as we had been talking about it in our classes earlier also that for PBTGs, we have two different variants of welfare activities. One genre goes to exclusively dealing with the Government of India's initiative. The second one is states that are given the kind of autonomy to do. Here, actually, because it is not categorized as such, what I want is the overall Government of India's recent initiatives, and then one odd state, just like in Tamil Nadu, there, kind of, you can pick up one odd state to see what kind of additional programs are being planned for, and that's where you indulge. On the other hand, the second part, that is the very tricky kind of a thing. When we speak about the second part, we have to bring in the problem in the nomenclature. That is why exactly they are called primitive tribal groups. The word itself is rather negative. The primitive word is rather negative. And so that shows the ethnocentric way of addressing them. Though it might not have been taken in that sense while giving that nomenclature. But eventually we understand that the word primitive has got negative connotations. And hence the later in the welfare state regime, the terminology got altered. Okay. Coming to the next one. So basically what we try to do here is under the PISA Act, empowering local self-governance impact. So basically the question is on women. Uh, so Panchayat Raj extension to scheduled areas. And, here, when we are talking about scheduled areas, it is largely the no mainstream areas, not the northeastern states whatsoever. So you try to enlist which are all the states we are talking about. And here, basically, you will have to look at it from the point of view of two communities, that is scheduled castes and scheduled tribes. Though for all practical purposes, we are mostly interested in the scheduled tribes. But then when women political participation forms the question, I think it's better we incorporate both of them. Having said that, uh, having said that, you will have to talk about this can be seen as one of the results of one that is feminist movement, though we don't give it a huge color in Indian context. But then that's how the impact was. The PISA Act was first seen as an act that is to be done for a particular population, a culture group. But women's political participation came like a surprise from there. See, even in those tribes where there are some bit of discontent or unpreparedness to take up the new kind of political regime, women's participation had ratified the whole process, and it hastened the process of political assimilation of those communities into the larger mainstream. So basically, their participation did not simply influence or impact them alone, but their participation had changed the whole lot of outlook. So we have another field, if you could recall, feminist anthropology. So this is a question wherein you are supposed to incorporate feminist anthropological discussions, where the problems of women are the subject matter, and the female studying the kind of a problem. Thirdly, the kind of solutions may be the result of the discussion between the different genders, etc. So I think that's where it is. So, this is that act which had really got self-identity, confidence, and the kind of feminist anthropological character we could see. Am I audible? Are you all good? You're all good? प्रॉब्लम इज यहाँ तो आप दिख नहीं रहे हो सारे लोग तो थैंक यू Now, deconstruct the colonial history of Indian anthropology, highlighting the critical role played. So basically, when we are talking about colonial history of Indian anthropology, we have to incorporate here the very interesting things, namely, we saw the discipline as something that was largely the given of the British colonial rulers. And hence, let me continue from there. The British Indian anthropology was was in a way evolving Indian anthropology and developing Indian anthropology. One, out of curiosity. Two, they were trying to identify several cultural aspects and study. Three, their idea of holism. Now, and also the kind of research methodologies we have done. You would be developing your answer on that, but look at the second part. What is the role played by Indian anthropology in sustaining its autonomy? So each of them, especially the content, makes anthropology very qualified to write on, to deal with the colonial history of Indian anthropology related questions. So it is from that point of view, if we observe, you can perhaps give certain references how the colonial, whether that is British or Indian, whatsoever, British or American, whatever methodology they must have followed, how that methodology got altered with the Indians coming up. So Indian anthropologists, though they do not subscribe to any one specific kind of theoretical paradigm, we see that they had this very inherent character of proving to be on par with the European writers. So that becomes one. Second thing is in the self-sustaining kind of autonomy that is given within Indian anthropology. We see that though we definitely were emulating what either the British or the Americans have said. But we, because of our own strength of our anthropology, we emerged as a force that should be reckoned with. So you try to identify one such other, significances as well. Now, this is another very beautiful kind of a question. Namely, yeah, that competition is going to continue. That's across the border competition. And let me quickly deal with this thing. So when we say Rakhi Gari's evidence, you go back, earliest evidence of Rakhi Gari, and the most recent a sudden spurt that had happened, and massive kind of a site that was discovered. So you may perhaps begin by talking about this comparison with Mehergar and then the opening statement. And you may perhaps mention Rakhi Gari as a strong evidence that has taken Indian civilizational studies to a much more much earlier time. So if you see 6,500 or 7,000 BC, if that is the time to which we are going in the discovery, it means that we were pulled back a lot when compared to the currently agreed upon time. So that gives us an enormous strength to call ourselves as somebody who was the first one to have civilization, maybe almost the first one to have the civilization, along with maybe Sumerians and Mesopotamians. That is one. And Rakhi Gari has every other thing that you think about. It has a huge amount of graves, granaries. It has human fossil evidences. It has pastoral evidences. It has the city culture. Name it, you have it from the civilization. And that's what makes it. It's not simply linked to the Harappan civilization. It is a part of Harappan civilization. Another very, very beautiful question that was asked, compare and contrast approaches of Vidyarthi and Srinivas. So I'm trying to say out, I hope you are able to write down, etc. Though I'm not so frequently making use of the pen here. And yeah, I have to say this after today's talk. From time to time, I will be conducting various webinars on different vibrant topics in anthropology, and I think that is going to do a lot good to you. And I insist that each one of you be a part of those webinars. try to take help of the very contemporary topics that may not be conventionally discussed in the regular classrooms, but I think here we will try to have some bit of chit chat, questioning, and I will be discussing several current things. Don't miss out on that. But yeah, coming back here to this particular question with Yarthi and Srinivas. So in the first paragraph can actually talk about how I was mentioning this earlier also, the ones that are stalwarts within the discipline of anthropology, where we see that Srinivas was studying the mainstream and Vidyarthi was largely studying voracious writers, both were the people close to the field, and and both of them tried to have a non-participant observation-based study, though participation was there with Srinivas, very, very narrow kind of a thing. And yeah, both of them tried to study social change, one among the tribes, the other among the Indian society, Indian mainstream. So having said that, in your huge introduction, you may perhaps go back to topic-wise selection for comparison. So you may begin with content. So in the case of content and concepts, if you say he was using the content related to the mainstream population, and that is where he was trying to give the social change among the mainstream population. Various mechanisms he was talking about: Sanskritization, Muslimization, etc. Whereas social change for LP Vidyarthi was among the tribes. So in both the cases, you may perhaps talk about a huge lot of things because your entire second paper more or less depends on these two people. So in the case of LP Vidyarthi, it may be the tools and concepts such as pseudo-tribalism and then Forest Rights Act, or uh, and maybe perhaps the way industrialization has been happening, industrial nomadism, etc. So we see that we are largely trying to compare one, that is research methodologies, to maybe concepts that were given by each one of them. And in both the cases, you will have to see a mild accommodation of the other entity. So Vidyarthi, though he was largely writing about the mainstream, he tried to incorporate the tribe-related discussion, and also the case with Srinivas, because all those core Indian concepts were actually taken to task, and then they were questioned, criticized, agreed, kind of. So that's what Srinivas was. So beginning and ending by almost a similar kind of a conclusion, that we do not find any such beautiful combination in any of the discipline where each one is an expert in himself. Each one was lending himself as an object to study by others. So I think that is really, really beautiful question that was asked. Are you all good, sir? Are you all good? You're all good? Okay. Is the pace okay and everything going good? Anything from your side? Anything? Because ऐसा ना हो कि you are rather doing it mechanically, and I'm sure you must be writing down. I hope you're writing down. Writing down is very, very important. Don't think that you can remember everything. Maybe when I'm explaining, I might be getting one kind of a structure. I mean, after half an hour, if you want me to explain, maybe another kind of a structure might come. So, okay. So let me go. Yeah, a little bit louder. Okay, fine. I'll do that. I'll do that. Though I have a very calm and quiet place here, but yeah. Hmm. So good that you pointed out. See, similarities, as I said to you, who is this? Why? How? Similarities, as I said to you, is the first. So initially, जब हम आपको, no, overview I was trying to show, I was mentioning that these two have the similarities of non-participant observation, and both of them are the field people. They try to give new concepts based on, one based on the questions that are offered to them, or based on the kind of field experiences they had, है ना? मोर नेम्स वगैरह कोशिश तो करेंगे यार, बट ये तो फिर बहुत ही 4-5 घंटों का क्लास ही बन जाए, है ना? But still, I'm majorly trying to get to you the kind of, no, the structure that you should be able to write and all, you know? But still, देखते हैं क्या हो. And yeah. So यहाँ पर आप जो भी स्टूडेंट्स अभी ऑनलाइन में हैं जो सुन रहे हो, any of you who are totally new and who haven't heard me, who haven't attended the sessions that I generally conduct, ऐसा कोई है तो you can, get in touch with me, soon after this thing. Maybe perhaps हम आपको जानने की कोशिश करेंगे, and let's see in what other ways I will be in a position to help you out. So you can get in touch with me through the, technical team out there. So they think in what other ways I can be of a better help to you. है ना? Yeah. अब बाकी जो अपने बच्चे हैं, बच्चा लोग तो you all know me. Right? So, impact of forest policies from so and so to so and so, we generally do it in terms of, categorizing the acts and policies. That's how I generally do. Your introduction has to talk about this because 2006 Forest Rights Act is also incorporated in this question. You'll have to introduce by saying that the series of laws and policies from 1878 to 2006 are a demonstration of the colonial power, colonial tendency of tribal exploitation and gradual confiscation of the rights of the tribals, which in a way seem to have been altered after 1980s through various committee recommendations, finally culminating into what we call the 2006 Forest Rights Act. So an effort now seems to have been made in the last about 18 years or so in giving back a part of the rights that are confiscated by the governments and through various policies and acts. I hope that would make the crux of the entire topic, and hence I think that should be a part of your first paragraph. Now, having said that, I mean, this is as such a pretty direct kind of a question. You go on. So it is not simply land alienation. It is talking about the general deprivation of rights also. So land alienation becomes one among them. So if at all you would want to distinguish like that, I don't think that way. Maybe you'll start with 1878 Act and then you'll gradually go to the 1927 Act in between whatever kind of categorizations that have come in the forest typologies and how rights of the tribals have been defined and redefined, categorized, uh, kind of, and that is where we see that village forests have been taken over, private forests have been taken over, and then minor forest produce are taken over, green woods are taken over by the government. So we see there's the deprivation of livelihood, deprivation of rights, and occasionally that giving rise to the kind of discontent and related movements. But then in the post-independence 1952 Forest Act, then you have various other committees such as Deepen, Tribal, etc. All this actually is a narrative of how deprivation of the tribals had happened. And you try to express your sympathy towards the tribal cause by indicating that this 2006 Act and 2007 resettlement and rehabilitation policy seem to have been a positive orientation in an otherwise colonial-stricken kind of a mindset, both in the pre-independent and post-independent times. And this particular tendency of identifying the rights of the tribes and working towards them, hopefully that should continue with the application of anthropological methods by the government. I think that is how you can perhaps close your answer. Okay. And then this is really marvelous, lovely, and scintillating erotic question. Ethical concerns in the biological and socio-cultural anthropology because of recent advances in artificial intelligence and genetic research. So perhaps we should be taking up these two terms separately. Of course, there is a connection between the two, that is artificial intelligence and genetic research. See, in the opening statement itself, you try to bring in the two things. One is the ethical dilemmas that are in the socio-cultural anthropology, two combination of social and biological ethics in eugenics. When we are talking about artificial intelligence, it is in that context trying to talk about how the so-called human is put to challenge and how the human identity is being challenged. So basically, we are trying to look at it in this format, namely. So I would say that these two, though there are interconnections, should be seen as entities that can be distinguishably treated. And in the case of artificial intelligence, especially, we see the identity of human being questioned at several places, replaced. There may be several positive applications, but the question is how to put a tab. Okay. And then this is a pure question on eugenic movement. In both these cases, what brings us to a commonality is common perils. The common perils. elite-centeredness, both in terms of capability to use as well as resourcefulness to use. As a result, we see the increasing gulf between the haves and have-nots. Okay, now here we should take the discussion to the other end. That is, give me a minute. How artificial intelligence is able to bring tools, technology for the betterment. So you may perhaps give the references of some of it industrial applications or in the applications of social research uh, and putting to practice the cultural understanding through, artificial intelligence. And yeah, this is one. And then when it comes to genetic studies, in the case of genetic studies, how improvement of the future generations is made to be possible, where you would be providing various tools that may be positive eugenic tools or negative eugenic tools. So it is here actually the detailing is happening. At many places you are trying to talk about the positive element. When it comes to anthropology, anthropology point of view, you will have to bring in technological determinism. Technological determinism that had taken over what we call cultural determinism, or even the case of environmental determinism. So all other determinants are actually coinciding into technological determinism, and that is where we see the ethical dilemma coming up. Basically, about, as I said to you, about the tabs who are to impose and for whose benefit it is. Yeah, coming to this man, essay on the life history of tribal activists. I mean, this is really beautiful. So, that first part you can take care, like, trying to give it as brief as possible. Like I generally say, in the case of any kind of tribal revolts, the kind of region, the kind of purpose for which they started to fight. Definitely you can add, you have to add Sai. You have to add that is a by default kind of a you know thing that should go in any question related to ethics and anthropology. So I was saying uh, who, where, why, when, and how. Those are the 5 questions that you should be adding to the discussion. And when we talk about which someone does impact, I look at it from different points of view. Namely, one is his role in cultural preservation. Secondly, in fighting ethnocentrism. And third is in the way government had responded through new laws and policies. See, how exactly you are going to arrange them is up to you. Many of you might be thinking of using the laws and policies, but that's also pretty good enough. And yeah, I think. And then you can also perhaps add how he had influenced the future generations in the freedom movement, awakening his own people against the British Raj and trying to establish the future generations on a real strong footing. Demographic challenges of India's changing population dynamics in the next 50 years. So let me talk about this. One is very high increase in the population density. Already we see density rankings are changing, kind of. Second one could be very high numbers turning up, increasing fertility, and we see that this spiral, population spiral, is on. Once we have established the first position, unless otherwise proper, population policy, uh, tightening the nose of the people comes into picture, I think this is something that is going to have a huge impact in the future as far as the numbers are concerned. And third most important thing is how exactly what are the dynamics of sex ratio and birth rates. They are also, and then we will have to talk about population structure, what kind of structure of the population we can. Is it that we would be having aging population, or is it that we would have the numbers, maximum numbers in the youthful ages, and this is one. And we also have to work on sex ratio, overall population, and child sex ratio. This is also something very, very important. So I think these become a significant thing. Roy Berman's concept of tribal development is basically the buffer zone concept, according to him, is it's like a via media between the more evolved and rather assimilated communities and isolated communities. This is basically to make us understand that Roy Berman was making a point that one cannot totally go by isolation, one cannot totally go by assimilation. There has to be a biomedium. So this, being a man who worked in the left-wing extremism related areas, knowing the core of uh, tribal discontent on an altogether different plane with practical experience, his idea of buffer zone has to be pretty much clear. So all this goes into your answer, whatever I was trying to mention. So in the buffer zone concept, he is sort of recommending to prepare the communities for the imminent change that is going to happen. And that's where it's very, very important that one would involve the experts, the subject experts, like, anthropologists, in preparing the people, in gathering their opinion. So in the buffer zone, he makes it a point that we should be using all the anthropological tools to collect the data and try to assist the government in coming up with the policies and programs that might really help the transitional phase rather. So basically here, perhaps you'll have to also comment on the possibility of having such kind of a buffer zone concept. Do we have enough time in the transitional phase, or is it that we are trying to pull them drastically towards one side, that is assimilation? As a result, we see marginalization of them is also happening. And this was something very other interesting thing, indigenous populations and tribes, and certain criteria was actually given by ILO Convention 169. It defined indigenous people by various criteria. And that is where we see the argument also coming up, whether India is a signatory or not. India has been fighting tooth and nail by not being a part of ILO's convention, because uh, that is where we get to see that the rights of indigenous people, if at all we are calling them Adivasis, how the Adivasi term may be different from the indigenous people term. So here what becomes necessary is to present Government of India's arguments on why exactly the word indigenous is not necessary for that matter, because already we are having Adivasi kind of a term. And yeah. So as I was saying earlier, those of you who have started to attend this particular session, kindly continue to attend and complete it. And don't think that once again you will come back to complete at a later point of time, unless otherwise you have some real time other engagement. So I was talking about this in the early discussion about Apathani, the work of Heimendorf, where he was trying to picturize the entire ethnograph through visual anthropology. And even the agrarian practices in a greater detail were picturized by him. He was dealing with the sacred grooves concept here, Apathani's sacred groove, and the rituals that are associated with the shifting cultivation, how effective the shifting cultivation is in Apathani, in the rain-fed and the other kind of cultivations. Sixth schedule also, that's a pretty direct question. Constitutional safeguards for. So when you talk about backward classes, you will have to begin by the biggest challenge backward classes have. That is how exactly to define backward classes, and then you would go in for other kind of the pretty conventional kind of a categorization. You may go for protective provisions and then welfare provisions, etc. I mean, even in the case of the conclusion, you will have to again bring back the same thing. As long as the criteria of for defining backward classes has been an argument, By the time we are actually coming to a larger conclusion, a consensus about who backward classes are, by which time a large other population that is actually deprived of the benefits is getting further marginalized. And hence, in your answer, you'll have to conclude by calling for a quicker action by the stakeholders, by the government, by the stakeholders, in order to identify them and to see to it that the safeguards are executed for that. Yeah. Forests and tribes, this was one question I was talking about even in the recent class, that is, custodians of natural resources are tribes, but they are the most deprived. This is where B.D. Sharma comes in. You can open your answer with B.D. Sharma the way he was making a mention that though there has been a sustainable relationship between the forests and tribes, the way governments have handled these two entities as two distinct ones and as tribes that are the exploiters of the forest rather than the conservators of the forest, that along with the culture contact, along with the coming up of forest policy, etc., the tribes have been pushed back into marginalized areas from the very kind of glorious, bountiful regions earlier. Having said this, already in a marginalized areas, marginalized regions without resources, um, the kind of climatic change, suppose we are talking about displacement of the tribes into newer climatic regions. I mean, that is one. So perhaps you may begin here by starting to talk about the interconnection between forest and tribes and how the mainstream legal position had handled them. This is one first part of it. When you come to the second part, how does the climate impact their survival in the future? One category you'll have to see is displacement, which has already happened for a huge number of people. So, change in the geographical and climatic situations and displacement, this is one. And second one is further marginalization, changing climates and changing life forms, deprivation of the forests, and then much stricter forest laws, etc. That is also going to impact. So one is displacement. Second one is second one is how the climatic changes of further marginalization. So that might impact in malnourishment or not having the safe drinking water, and then perhaps a lack of a balanced diet, and then children getting stunted. The growth patterns might actually get affected. So when we are talking about this, unless otherwise active intervention in terms of disease control and health intervention, nutrition intervention, the marginalization is bound to change. And that is where I think you can give a couple of schemes by Government of India on the health. And very beautiful. Let me talk about these. They're very tricky questions. I mean, I think that's where my presence is required. Difference between secularism, religiosity, religious fundamentalism, and spiritualism from an anthropological perspective. When I say anthropological perspective, we are largely to look at from the point of view of, as we routinely talk about this, that is from the point of view of cultural relativism. And yeah, from that point of view, so there may be several variants of secularism, which you must have studied in the study of political systems and Indian polity, etc. So when we say secularism, this is where you are trying to respect. You agree that others exist. You agree that others exist and you respect all. Religiosity is uh, a cultural variant of secularism. So we can say that um, there is more emphasis of one's own culture, one's own religion, and there might be intense observation of one's own religious ways. Religious fundamentalism is highly ethnocentric. Highly ethnocentric. So here in this case, we accept the others and we respect all. In this case, intense observation of one's own religious rituals, etc. Religious fundamentalism is the extreme concept which is filled with ethnocentrism, and to the extent of having even the hatred for others. Spiritualism is nothing to do with religion. It is a connect that you want to establish with uh, the, the, the supreme, the otherworldly entities. So in order to establish that kind of spiritualism, you might be using religion as one of the tools. So you can see two extremes we are trying to see, or a triangular entity rather. Religious fundamentalism, that is where requirement of anthropologists is highest. And one of the solutions for religious fundamentalism may be secularism, that is seen as one of the alternatives, secularism. On the other hand, spiritualism is to do with nothing so significant about religion, but then it is to establish that connect with the supernatural. And for this, maybe perhaps religiosity can be taken up as one of the tools. So anthropologically speaking, what is most preferred is not to be ethnocentric, so to fight religious fundamental. Even in fighting religious fundamentalism, what anthropology tries to teach us is try to understand their perspective. So if you're calling somebody religious bigots or religious fundamentalists, as an anthropologist, it becomes important to establish a conversation with them and try to get the details from them, why exactly they prefer one way of maybe the hatred whatsoever. And I think that is where the role of anthropologist is. This is one of the recent articles about Dr. P.K. Bhaumik decriminalization of. So basically here we see the entire debate coming up. Several tribes are facing this, several criminal tribes have been facing this, though they got denotified, the kind of nomenclature they're coming up with that is taking them back to the roots of the criminal tribe and further kind of, non-accommodative treatment that was happening. So basically use this question to highlight the problems of the criminal tribes. Though decriminalizing as a status is being mentioned in the case of the Lodha, this is about the overall thing. I think no, I'm showing the same screen, but I don't know. Oh, great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Um, Actually, I wanted to show a book, but I'm not carrying it right now. with the same title, one article was actually published. No? Existing paradigms of holistic health for the marginalized sections of society, drawing inference from COVID-19. Paradigms of holistic health. So basically, because from the inference of COVID-19 we are mentioning, so you will have to talk about it from the three sectors, that is primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. That is number one. Second thing is how one is able to address child health and women health. That is second one. I mean, as far as sectors is concerned, so sectors wise, primary, secondary, and tertiary, how these three are being accessed by specific marginalized or disadvantaged communities. So in that sense, we will have to incorporate women and children on the one hand. Second one is rural and urban segments. Third is tribe, specifically whether what kind of mainstream and conventional medicine they are able to get access to. That's where I think we can liberally use the Labour Commission's recommendations, though they were pretty old, and CAPA panel also should be incorporated, though that doesn't incorporate COVID. But fourth element is largely about the other genders, the other genders. So these are the four major things. And also incorporate specific schemes such as ICDS and all the recent initiatives by the Prime Minister about comprehensive health conditions of these segments. I think this is a question where all those schemes can actually be put to use. And there is enough appreciation for the schemes, so that appreciation can also go into. But overall, I think in the initial statements or in the concluding statements, you must be incorporating this UN's basic premise. What has to be the percentage of GDP that should be spent on the health sector to make it a holistic health policy. I think on that, comparing with India's spending, which shows that despite so many positive elements in the schemes are concerned, but when the GDP spending itself is not occurring, in such a case, it looks to be a lacunae in the entire health segment. Having said that, yeah, this is a pretty direct kind of a question, sir. Theories of origin of caste, and but the only problem is that this is a short question, a 15 marker, and hence you'll have to, I think, in the first case, you will not be able to explain the whole thing. You better do it in the form of a table. Give a table, and what is the basic premise? The table may get into a couple of pages, doesn't matter. And then you go in for caste, class. The reason why caste, class, and race are put together in this question is that there is racial origin theory and Varna origin theory. So don't simply go in for differentiating. You make a clear mention there that these three entities are to be compared in the special light of the caste origin theories that have a link with class and race. Otherwise, your answer will be like the two entities are disconnected. Don't try to make a disconnected kind of an answer. You see to it that the theories of origin, the reason why the second part of the question has come is there is a connection between class, race, and caste. Okay? And ethno-nationalism, beautiful. So resurgence of ethno-nationalism, you are supposed to pick up various entities across the country uh, you know, secessionist tendencies are there. That is number one. Second thing is, what are the renewed no causes for emergence of nationalism, re-emergence of nationalism? So one, the first part is where secessionist tendencies are there, what makes them a valid criteria for nationalism, if at all we are using anthropology as an explanation, the tool to explain. Second thing is, even for the resurgence of nationalism, what is the renewed kind of an identity, whether you call it COVID, whether you call it the trade relations and geopolitics, etc. And sir, it is here, I always had been cautioning the students of how exactly to support or not to support. In the context of a traditional way of looking at anthropological ethics, nationalism was seen as something that where the anthropological ethics come in as a barrier, to give solutions in the name of nationalism, etc. But see, you are already communicated through various lectures in the classroom also that because along with various other things, anthropological ethics are also changing. And hence, we now see that in the interest of the nation, in putting together the idea of nation and nationalism, we will be in a position to, give an altogether different kind of a solution, not in the conventional anthropological ethics. So that also has to come as a part of it. When you say anthropological lens itself has been changing. That you should make a point. And having said that, you will be incorporating. Yeah, question number 8 for that matter. You have this particular thing coming up. I mean, yeah, the Paleolithic sites, you give the map south of Vindhyas, huge number of sites, all those beautiful sites, and then you may name some of them to write and discuss, see how various tool typologies and technologies, how they are different from the northern or eastern or western Paleolithic cultures. So that makes, and then even the earliest Paleolithic site coming up from the South India, it also is a feather in the cap of South Indian Paleolithic cultures. Say that. Yeah. Distinguish theocratic state from secular, liberal, democratic. Theocratic in the modern times, I mean, states like Iran, the theocratic state. Secular, as we claim India. Liberal, as we claim India. Democratic, as we claim India. There might be others, but we are a very beautiful combination. You may perhaps compare with the United States of America. And yeah, from tribal and contemporary societies, that is where the glitch comes from. So, in the case of tribal anthropology, tribal communities, we see that the tribals have been imposed, have been influenced by the outsiders, whether that is Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity or Islam, whatsoever. That is where we see that the tribe, which more or less was having its own isolated form of culture with its own belief system, when it has got exposed to the mainstream religions, for that matter, these new ideas are coming up with them. And that's where sometimes they try to reclaim their identity, insist their identity. So I think this is a slightly trickier one to convince the examiner. As far as this question is concerned, I told you special reference to mining. You can start from the whole tribe in transition through the recent Gandhamardan mines and how the tribal displacement has been. You can use this as a development-induced displacement concept and try to also add resettlement and rehabilitation policy. So that is where I have come to a close of your session, and I thank you all for being there. Though it was a tedious exercise of spending with me here for a couple of hours, but I am more than delighted to have you all around. Sir, as I told you earlier, if at all anybody is there who is new, kindly contact our people so that I'll try to see to it that I may give you a couple of additional guidelines to you, help you out in your exam. And the team, thank you so very much for helping me. And yeah, can I call it a day? And should I remain now? Whoever have joined, yeah, thank you all. Thank you so much. Love you that you were all here. Hoping to meet you, see you all in the further sessions in the future. Have a great anthropology time, and I hope to see you all in the selections. If at all you have written this year, all the best for the result. If you're writing next year, we are there to help you out. Have a great time. God bless you. Thank you so much.